Hi, my name is Dave Fry. I'm the production director here at Blue Star Recyclers. And today we're going to talk about disassembling a computer tower and mostly focusing on how to do that safely. Mostly we want everyone doing stuff the same way every time. And that way we can avoid some injuries and that kind of thing. So first thing I want to talk about is, first of all, what I'm wearing. Just dress comfortably. I do have long pants on and closed-toed shoes. These happen to be steel-toed. You don't have to have steel-toed, but we do recommend it. Long pants, because we're around pallets, we're around computers that are stacked, and we don't want anything falling and scraping the leg. Next, I'm putting on gloves and goggles for protective eyewear. Does need to be protecting the sides, so if you're wearing glasses or something like that, that's not enough. You can get something to fit over your glasses that protects the sidewall there. There's stuff that fits over, there's stuff that attaches to reading glasses if that's something you need. You want to be checking your equipment all the time. So before the beginning of any workday, check your gloves. Make sure there are no holes in them. Make sure your glasses aren't cracked. They're clear enough. If you need to clean them, go ahead and get some glass cleaner or whatever you need to do to get the glasses clean so you can see. All right, tools. I am missing my air tool. Hold up. Let me steal this. Air tool. It's the number one tool we use around here. It's nice because you're not sitting here with a manual screwdriver, twisting. We don't want carpal tunnel. And this tool makes it easier for that. You just hit a button and let the tool do your work for you. So it's just a quick connect, and you're good to go. So, thing with an air tool, you want to be working in line with the hose. So if you want to come closer, cameraman. We're going to work in line with the hose because I don't want to be pulling this thing over here. This hose can break. I'm also really straining to be pulling this a lot, so we just want to work connected to the closest point. This has a fair amount of torque to it. You don't want it poking anywhere near your body. Just keep it away from your face. It does have an exhaust for the air. Keep that also away from your face because you don't want dust and stuff blowing up towards you. So point away from the body, exhaust away from the face, and in line with the hose there. Next tool we use, flathead screwdriver. There aren't a lot of flatheads screws in the computer. But we use this primarily as a prying tool, and we'll talk more about the safety of that when I get an example to show you once we have one of these computers open. But we'll get back to this. Last one that we use a lot, wire cutters. As the name implies, they are just for cutting wire. I've seen people periodically try to pick screws out or cut plastic. We don't want to do that. That dulls the wire cutters, and so it comes time that you actually need to cut a wire, you'll be really working to do that. And actually kind of pulling, almost using like a sawing motion, and that's a great way to get a cut on your forearm. So wire cutters, just for cutting wire. A lot of times you don't even need to do that. These computers are primarily plugged in. All the plugs, they just unplug. It was plugged in to put it together and unplugs to take it apart. Cool? All right. So, starting. Let's see here. Opening the computer. Computers open in three basic ways. I've got the three examples here in front of me. These all happen to be Dells, I think. Nope, Lenovo. Anyway, they're going to open on one side, like this one. It doesn't even have any screws, it's just got a lever. It opens just one side. You notice on the other side, these are rivets here. If it was riveted together, those rivets are not intended to come apart. We don't take them apart. They didn't rivet the computer to get all the stuff inside it. Those rivets were already there, and then they put the stuff in there. So if rivets are there, we leave them there. Next option. So that was opening on one side. This opens on two sides. We know that because there are no rivets here, but there are screws. There are screws in there, they can come back out. Screws on both sides. That's important because if there are screws on both sides, they're giving you access to both sides, so both of these walls are going to come off because you'll need access screws on both sides, usually to remove the hard drive or the media drive. And then the last kind opens up like an alligator mouth. Just opens up a lid. This lid doesn't come back off, it's attached down here. But everything you need to access is just by opening the lid, or if you have it on the side, kind of like an alligator mouth. So the one that we're going to do, we're going to do the one that opens on just one side. I've already opened the lid so I can see everything inside. Since we're recycling, we're not so concerned. I'm sorry about that. We're not so concerned about what it does. It's about what it's made of. So these frames they're just ferrous metal, and so we'll categorize this with the other ferrous metal. That can go to a local scrapyard. All right, so you notice the first thing I did. When I had these on display, these were sitting upright. Now, for safety purposes, I've got it laying down. I don't want this sitting up here, so if I'm working with a screwdriver, knocks down, falls on tools or something else, gonna knock everything every which way, someone's gonna get hurt. So for safety purposes, we want it planted flat on the table. First thing, why don't you come on over here and see what's going on inside this. We're gonna start by taking out the power supply. That's this piece right here. To identify the power supply, it's usually got 3 or 4 screws holding it in. It's got the plug right there. That's the plug that's going to go into the wall. And it's got the big horsetail of wires. That's a big bunch of multicolored wires all coming out from the back. I'm going to lay it flat and start popping out screws. Try and get an angle that you guys can still see this. And so as I'm doing this, I'm taking the screws out. And I don't want to have them just thrown all over the table. Here, I'll show you. You have screws all over the table, and you have your tower on top of it. You start rolling around like that, especially if you get a bunch of them. And that's perfect design for that to fall off the table, knock your feet, and you'll be glad you had steel-toed shoes on. So we want to put all our screws in here as we take them out. All right, so I've taken the 4 screws out. This one is loose right here. Now I'm going to go inside and just start unplugging wires everywhere I see. This is the first step. I unplug the wires because I want to be able to see what's going on inside the computer. There's wires running every which way. I can't really see what I'm doing. Notice I haven't reached for my wire cutters yet. These all just unplug. And now hopefully we can worm this power supply out. Nope. One more plug. That's a power supply. All the wires on there, all of them just unplugged. You notice the other thing, the way I'm working. I've got a chair here. If I'm choosing to not use it, if I'm sitting on a chair and I'm pulling wires, I'm pulling like this. My arm is going over the edge of the tower. That's a great way to get cut. These edges are usually slightly rounded, but every now and then you could have a piece of metal that's bent, a broken piece of plastic. You could end up scraping your arm on that. So I prefer to work standing up, and so when I pull on a wire, I'm pulling straight up. I'm nowhere near the edge of any of this. All right, so I've got the power supply out. We've got the ribbon wire out. We've got the extra wires. So now I'm just looking for any remaining wires. I've got a couple right here. I'll pull those. If I can get them to their roots, and pull that stuff out. You can pull it like that. If you don't feel like you can just rip them, of course, go ahead, cut the ends if you need to. All right, so now on the inside of this, you can go 2 ways. We've got a couple media drives over here, optical drives, if you want to call it that. Hard drive. We've got the main motherboard, and this big thing over here, is really just the heat sink and the fan. This helps keep the computer cool. So you can go either way. You can start working on this side and get that stuff out, or you can work on the motherboard. If whatever one you don't do, you're going to have to go back and do the second part anyway. So for my purposes, I'm going to go ahead and do these first. I'm going to get the optical drives out and then the front cover plastic. And for that, I'm just looking for any screw. If I see a screw, I take it out. That's what I did there. I didn't have the screw all the way in there. Or the bit all the way into the screw. So the bit's all the way in there. Got one screw on the outside here. If you're ever working on something, you think you've got all the screws out, you start pulling on it and it doesn't come out, there's a good chance you've got a hidden screw somewhere. So just look around if there's any remaining screws. This is a hard drive. It's got the serial number on there and everything. I'm going to take this out. You notice even for small pieces, I'm not working up here on my chest or doing any of this crazy stuff. I don't want to end up stabbing myself. That's not fun. So I'm going to keep it flat on the table. Any screws that fell out, we'll get them in the bucket. This is just a metal frame that can go at the frame on the outside of the computer. And that's the hard drive. You can tell that there's plugs on this side. Otherwise, it's fully encased. I can't put any media into it. That's a good thing to notice because I'll show you when I get the optical drive or the media drive out, there is place for media. So that's a little different. And that's next, media. Flathead. Okay, so when we're using the flathead, like I said, we're using this as a prying tool. I'm going to find an edge, a place where I can get it in there. So with my dominant hand, I'm going to do the leverage. My non-dominant hand, which is in a glove, I'm going to cover it because as I'm applying pressure to this thing, at one point it's going to pop. Now, if I'm going to be working around other people, I don't want that thing to pop into their face. I don't want a bit of plastic to come into my own face. So whatever I'm prying on, I'm going to cover with my other hand. Working here. That's the plastic cover to it. It's a media drive. All these are going to go in the same category. These two are for CDs. This one's a little smaller for the old floppy. Get the case off the outside. Media drive. Mentioned there's a place to put media in these, or how this opens up here, as opposed to the hard drive that does not have any openings to it. So, media drives, hard drive, more metal. All right, so now I've got all that stuff out of here. Oh, I got a couple wires here. Couple wires. And now I just have the main motherboard here because everything else is gone. So this is, remember how we said we could, after take the power supply out and the wires, you could either work on the media drive and the hard drive, or you could do the circuit board. Now we're doing the latter. We're doing the circuit board. Getting the fan cover off. This can go with the other plastics. The fan. Just cut the wire on the fan. This one happened to come off really easy. There was just a lever right there that I pushed in with my thumb to slide it out. Other times you may have Phillips screws or some other kind of screw holding the fan in. Once inside, you can see over here, got a big heat sink on here. Heat sink is what helps keep the computer cool. That motherboard gets pretty hot, especially the main processor chip. And this is made of aluminum. Aluminum draws the heat up out of it. So now we've got a big aluminum block. So that's clean aluminum, it doesn't have any other stuff on it. And that's a processor chip. It sits by itself, that's its own category. piece of plastic. All right, so now we've got the motherboard in there. Motherboard looks like it's held in by about 10 screws. That's pretty common. And then you've got, this one only has 1 slot cards. You may have 4 or 5 slot cards. Get the slot cards out first. You see the slot cards are screwed in to the side of the frame here, and those in turn are pinning down the motherboard. So we're going to take the slot card out first and then work on getting the motherboard out. That's a slot card. The thing that really identifies this, it's got this nice L-shaped piece on it, and it's got these gold fingers down at the bottom. Sometimes these have heat sinks. It might have a smaller version of this heat sink on there somewhere. Video cards sometimes have that. We want to take those all off before it goes into the box. So it's green. Little distinction there. Every now and then you get some that are like yellow or purple, red. Only the green ones are considered a high-grade board. This one are considered a slot card. If it's any other color than that, we're going to put it, for our purposes, in the mid-grade box. Now, I'm just looking at all the other screws that are holding this motherboard in, so I'm just going to start popping screws. Another piece of plastic. This was holding the heat sink in there. You notice the other ones, I'm just leaving the screws in there because I can see that this frame, there's no place for the screws to fall out, so I know that they're not going to fall onto the floor. If you were to be working on a computer like this one over here that has 2 sides open, you'll need to put all the screws in there because there's no bottom to it then, and the screws are just going to fall out. So just safety thing. If there's a way for screws to fall out, definitely be getting them in here because we don't want to be making a mess. A hazard. Another check there. Sorry, explain what I was doing. I thought I had all the screws. Quick glance, I did. So I started pulling on it and see that that isn't coming out. I've got one little screw kind of hidden down there. Give it a tug, see if it's not coming out. If it's not coming out, just look for a reason why. This computer was put together in a systematic way. It's going to come apart in a systematic way. Nothing needs to be forced. So this is the shell. This is done. This can go with our other pieces of metal and everything else. The screws are made of metal. They can go right along with it. This is the last thing. This is the motherboard here. Couple more things we need to get off. We got the main heatsink that was sitting right here. We've got a smaller heatsink. We've got 2 RAM chips in here. We've got a button battery, or some people call that a CMOS battery. CMOS battery, it's got a little clip right there. Just pop it and it falls right out. The RAM sticks, push down the 2 tabs and then those come out. Anything probably from the past 10 years or newer is going to have gold fingers on the end of these. That's important because sometimes you will find them that have silver fingers on the end. And when I say fingers, again, I'm referring to the same things we saw in the slot card. These little gold tabs coming down like that. So gold, I don't have a silver example to give you, but those are pretty old. We don't see a lot of those. Last thing is this heatsink right here. You'll see it's got 4 little springs that are holding it down. And the other thing, I know that underneath this there's a little bit of glue. So a quick way to do it is to break the glue. Again, I'm prying now, so I'm going to put a hand covering over it, and then I'll pry. Okay, so now I broke the glue. You can see it wiggles around. And I'll just use my index finger and push down the springs. And it falls right out. This one I'm going to call dirty aluminum. That's because there's springs on here. These are ferrous metal springs, as opposed to this one that doesn't have any other metals or plastics attached to it. So that's it. It's fully taken apart. The next part, we're going to get this put away. I'm not going to show you all our bins, how we have that set up, but how I would do it is I'm going to start putting all my parts back in here. Just stack them in. I'm going to use the frame as a carrying case. Because I'm trying to get through in a work day, I'm trying to get through at least 16 of these in about 4 hours. I don't want to be walking for just one piece, dropping it in a box, coming back for one other piece. I want to be taking everything in one shot. And this is a safe way to do it. Got the metal. Put that inside. Doesn't really matter how you arrange it, as long as it's all in there and it's not going to fall out on you. And then the plastic. Now, of course, the last thing is, even though I've got all the boxes, I'm not going to sit back and launch it. I want to walk over to the box and safely just put it in the box. That way we can get through a whole computer, we can get through it quickly, we can get through it safely. Cool, thanks for watching.